Hello and welcome to this mini webinar about stress during the cost of the living crisis. As you can imagine, there are lots of reasons why people get stressed, and here's just a few. But for the purpose of this webinar, I will be concentrating on money because let's face it, if money is involved in any shape, way or form, it causes a lot of anxiety, stress, and unfortunately it's actually linked to suicide as well. So here's many reasons why people get stressed. We'll be focusing on money, but in addition, there's loads of other things as well. But just before I kind of do the doom and gloom, all the depressing stuff, I do want to point out that actually some stress is good. And so I just wanted you to look at this little graph here, which shows that actually when you have quite a lot of stress, okay, and that's not saying there's so much of it that you can't cope, but when you have a bit of it, you actually perform and do very well in life. For example, work is a classic example. If you have a bit of stress at work, it makes you feel like you have a purpose. You know, it's good to have goals. It keeps your motivation going. However, as we can see from this graph, too much stress can create burnout and potentially lead on to a breakdown, which is not what we want. So we are hopefully going to prevent all of that from happening, even from a session like this. So stress in general is basically pressure that we feel like we can't cope with, okay? And there's loads and loads of different symptoms. And here's just a few, okay? There's actually quite a few more symptoms, but I thought I would pick out the main ones. From looking at this slide, there's two tables. You've got the top table, which is all the psychological symptoms. And when I mean psychological, I mean stuff going on in your head. And I'll go through some examples in a minute. And then we've also got physical symptoms, which is stuff going on in your body. What's really interesting around stress, anxiety, and actually mental health in general is the links between the mental health and the physical health. They do not exist separately. They are very much linked, as we shall see. So let's go through some examples of each. So psychologically, typical symptoms of when someone is too stressed, they feel like they can't enjoy themselves like they normally can. They might have a lot of anxiety, feel on edge. They might feel tearful, snappy, moody, might not be able to concentrate for a very long time, or if at all. Sometimes we get this sort of brain fog. And the thing to notice about the eating and sleeping is more or less there will be a change there. So some people will say, well, I sleep quite a lot anyway. And it's like, well, okay, well, I would be personally interested in, are you sleeping in a different habit? So I know for me, I sleep super well all the time. So if I didn't sleep very well, that is a big warning sign to say, what's going on for you? You clearly are stressed about something, okay? So it's noticing changes, okay? Because actually sometimes people might eat really well or not at all. So it's just noticing those changes there. So that's more with your psychological stuff going on in the head. And then looking at that below table, which is your physical symptoms, stuff going on in your body. So your body will almost kind of shut down in certain areas when it's had enough, basically, in a nutshell. So here's some examples: indigestion, heartburn, problem with like your stomach, bowels, your blood pressure goes through the roof. You might feel dizzy. It might lead on to such high anxiety that you have a panic attack. Sometimes people get serious, like real bad headaches, but then it affects their eyesight and they can't see properly, right? It's basically your body shutting down because it's basically had enough, okay? So it's quite interesting to think. Mental health, physical health, hugely related. And if I have one more slide on this, just to kind of emphasize the point, is when we are stressed, in a nutshell, this is the easiest way to me explaining it to you, when we're stressed, we create a lot of cortisol, and cortisol is a stress hormone, and some stress hormone normal, okay? Too much of it, though, it attacks our immune system. And our immune system, if it's attacked, we're more likely to have a cold, more likely to have the flu, catch COVID, right? Or have more serious autoimmune diseases. For example, celiac disease or arthritis, okay? It's an inflammation in your body and it's making you feel poorly. And often it is created by things that have happened in our past or stress, but constant stress. It's not good for our mental health or physical health. And here's a question here. It says, when were you last unwell? And it's often when we just suddenly relax. We go on holiday and we haven't relaxed for ages, and all of a sudden it catches up with us. Often over Christmas, people often get poorly because they've just sat down, relaxed, and then their immune system's so shocked because they've been so stressed because they've been dying for this break that they get poorly. Like it happens with, over half of the population. So it's just something to think about, that the two, mental health, physical health, especially with stress, is hugely related. So now let's think about how can we help this situation, okay? Because money is probably tight for everyone. It's not just people on, maybe getting benefits. It's everyone. Everyone is feeling the pinch. And if they're not now, they certainly will be. So what can we do to help ourselves? And the good news is there's lots of really, I'd say, fairly easy things that we can do that are free, that we can all do with just a bit of prioritization, basically. So let's have a look at this analogy here on this screen. I have said, fuel your tank. Now, if you think about a car needs fuel to run. When it starts running out of fuel, it starts to maybe not operate as well. Without fuel completely, it breaks down. And us as human beings, we are quite similar. We need fuel to run. And I want you to have a think about, how much fuel do you have in the tank right now? Are you on empty, or are you getting there on empty? If you're in the red zone, you have to work almost double as hard to get back out. So the best thing, if possible, is to keep as much fuel in your tank as possible, okay? We need it as full as all the time because it makes you resilient. It makes you ready for change, ready to adapt and adjust and deal with and bounce back from any kind of things that get thrown your way that are difficult. So not only does it help you with stress, all this fuel, and we'll look at fuel examples in a minute, but it helps you be more resilient, which is exactly what we all need. So how to deal with stress, okay? How to fuel your tank. And I've just got a couple of slides and then hopefully leave you with some ideas that you can take forward. So how to deal with it? First things first is to talk about it. When we suppress our emotions, it is super unhealthy. Often, and I think many people are guilty of this, I have definitely been guilty of this in the past, still do it now and again. I sometimes think, oh, I haven't really got time to deal with that, or I'm not sure if I should. I don't think I can deal with facing that raw emotion that makes me upset. I'm going to park it and deal with it another time, or I'm going to suppress it and make sure it goes away. And it might go away short term, but eventually will come out like a volcano ready to erupt. So it's super, super important we all talk about how we're feeling, our emotions, stress. If we're not really good at talking, then I would encourage people to write it down, okay? Because not everyone is really good communicators. And if they're not, get a pen and paper, write it down, write yourself a letter, write how you're feeling, It's a very, very powerful tool to just getting rid of any kind of unwanted emotions. The next tip on how to fuel your tank and to also deal with stress is know your warning signs of too much stress. So I mentioned about the sleep and eating habits earlier. Have you noticed a change in your behavior? Again, I know for me, I eat very well, probably too well. So if I start losing my appetite, doesn't happen very often, but if I do, then I know that I'm not right and something needs to be done. Warning sign for me as well is I get tearful. I cry quite easily. I feel very overwhelmed and sensitive about everything, even if it's like an advert on TV, it could set me off. So whatever it is, and you probably never, to be honest, people watching this webinar, you probably never even thought about what your webinars are, what your warning signs are. You probably never thought of it. It might be that you notice like physical changes, like racing heart rate. Your heart is always racing. Okay, if you know your warning signs, then you can avoid getting into that empty zone. And then looking after yourself with sleep, exercise, and diet. If these three things are my foundation. They are things I don't negotiate on. They are things I have to have in my life. So I have to have a good sleep. I have to exercise, and I have to have a relatively good diet. They're non-negotiables for me, because if they do, like, I can just have a week on holiday and eat a load of rubbish, and because I'm an all-inclusive, and maybe drink too much alcohol, and I feel just gross when I come home. I feel like I've put on 3 stone. I feel really lethargic, low mood. And a lot of that is because what I've eaten, it's what I've consumed. So, and sleep, your body repairs itself mentally, physically when you sleep. So they are the basic things. And there is a webinar on sleep if you want to watch it, just so you can get an idea of how important it is, what function it does, and then obviously always got to end on lots of tips. Spending time with friends and family is always good. Again, if you look at why people have breakdowns and stuff, it's often because they isolate themselves, or they feel, doesn't necessarily mean it's true, they often feel very lonely. And that's really sad. So don't ever try and feel like that. If you don't have a lot of support network, there are plenty of charities and people out there that do want to help you, which are all on the BCP Together webpage if you want more information where to go. And then we've got a couple more things. Make time for things that you enjoy. And I say that, make time for things you really enjoy, not things like you feel like you have to do. So like, for example, I go to the gym most days and I kind of enjoy it, but sometimes I don't. Certain classes and stuff I don't. So I don't count that in what I really enjoy. What I really enjoy is like reading a book, a trashy magazine, maybe a TV program that's just complete trash, but it makes me laugh. They're the things what I really want to do. You should always be aiming for that. Thinking about every day, think about when you say yes to things. Do you really want to say yes to that? Something to think about, something I've often do, and I realise that maybe I don't do everything I want to do. A couple of other things, challenge your negative thoughts. Again, there's a whole section on negative thinking webinar if you want to find out a bit more about that. And I would really encourage you to. It's Change My Life. It's basically cognitive behavioural therapy, and it really makes you start to question a little bit the narrative in your head that often tells porcupines that isn't always true. So check that out if you haven't already. And then the last one is coping strategies. How are you coping with the cost of living and the stress that it's causing you? Have a little moment to think about that. Is it causing you stress? You know, if you're watching this webinar, I expect it is. And if it isn't, then fair play, be proactive about it. You know, what are you doing? You know, for me, I know that I'm trying out budget planner tools that I've never looked at before in my life. I'm speaking to people about it more because I never used to do that either. I'm practicing self-care more than I normally would. Okay, it's really, really important that you look at coping strategies. And here are some examples. You know, coping strategies are ways to help you deal with stuff, basically. And there's lots of negative ones here. And again, I've been totally guilty of many of these negative ones. You know, drinking too much, overeating, self-harm, smoking, done all of that. You know, long term does you no good, basically. You've got to try and find good ones. You know, is it that you like writing a little diary? Is it that you try hobbies now and again? Is it that you just phone your mum every night and see how she's doing? Is it photography? You know, is it stuff like this, learning self-development and being the best version of yourself, you know? So you should all have like at least a few in your life, okay? Because the more you have, then the more likely you're going to have a good life, isn't it, basically? So I want you to take this opportunity to have a little moment and think about how you're dealing with this situation. And also just don't ever feel alone. Hopefully take an action from this session that you've just listened. And last slide is to be kind to yourself. We are often our worst critic. You know, we probably wouldn't speak to a friend the way we speak to ourselves. So I shall leave you with that little note and hope that after today you will prioritise dealing with stress and be kind to yourself.